What's up, basketball coaches, players, and fans? Welcome to the Pass First podcast, where we share our knowledge of the game of basketball. My name is Alex Engel, and I'm here with my partner, Augie Johnston. We hope you're able to take something away from this podcast that will help you on your basketball journey. Today, we have two special guests coming in with both pro overseas and G League experience. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. All right, welcome in, everybody. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Really excited today. We have two, great basketball players in here joining us. Both of them former college and professional players. One of them, I think, most recently still playing, and that is Kerry Carter and Dominique Johnson. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We appreciate you coming on the show. And today, we kind of want to get a little background on you guys before we get started. We're going to be talking about a little bit of basketball, but we're also going to get into some of the current events that are currently going on in the basketball world and, with the civil rights world right now. So I'm going to toss it over to you, Kerry, first. Give us like a little brief background on yourself as far as, where you grew up and then your basketball experience and journey.
Thanks for having us. So I grew up in West Covina, was unrecruited out of high school, didn't have any offers, very little interest, ended up going to junior college route, went to Citrus College. Great shirt. They kind of learned how to become a student. And then my recruitment took off after my freshman year. By my sophomore year, I was junior college All-American. Had a good amount of schools to choose from, ended up going to St. Mary's. And then from there, had a brief career overseas, playing for 3 years. And then recently just got into coaching.
Okay. And you, this last year, most recently coached at Cal Baptist, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I just want to mention one thing, that it seems like the more we do these little interviews, the more it seems like people have these Cinderella stories in basketball of not being recruited and then going on and doing crazy things. So that was interesting.
And what about you, Dom?
Born and raised from Detroit, Michigan. Went to high school, wasn't heavily recruited either. I didn't know about the ACT test until my senior year of high school. Oh. So, ended up going to junior college in Memphis, Tennessee, just like Kerry. Was the player of the year at junior college. Signed my letter of clearance to Northern Illinois University, but fell a grade short of the clearinghouse. So APU was recruiting me. This was my first time on the West Coast. Came on my visit, signed on the spot, and from there, just been playing ball.
And you've had, I did a little bit of kind of research on both you guys, obviously your backgrounds as far as where you played, but I saw you had a little bit of a stint in the G League. At the time, I guess it was the D League, right? But, and then overseas as well. And what were like some of the countries that both of you guys played in? Dom, go ahead, go first, and then Kerry, you can tell us where some of the countries you played in.
The D League was definitely an eye-opener for me. But I got a chance to be with some real professionals such as Antonio Daniels, showed me how to be a professional, how to approach the game, how to take care of my body and things of that nature. But then after that, I ended up going to Poland, Turkey, Israel, Germany, China, Italy, France, Lebanon. Yeah.
Wow. You traveled the whole world.
So far, man, I mean, basketball, I look at it as a gift and a curse. But so far it's been good for me. Giving a lot of wisdom back to the youth. And it's still a process, man. I'm still doing it.
Yeah. And I think I saw most recently you were going to be playing in France. Is that correct?
I was in France, and then I left. I left there before the virus and everything hit.
I know that shut down a lot of people. A lot of people came home because of that. And then, Kerry, what about you? What were some of the places you played?
I started my career in Spain, and then from there, I actually got sent home my first contract. So I was home for a lot of the year. Started working out, learning how to become more of a point guard than a two guard. And then I went to Germany. From there, I went to Italy, and then I finished my career in Israel.
Okay. Same thing. Well, a lot of different places. And Augie played, I think we talked about it a little earlier, but he went in Germany and then Luxembourg for most of his career. So, all right. So now that we got a little bit of background on you guys, we're going to go through real quickly. We call these kind of the rapid fire questions. we're gonna, give you a question. Just give us a brief answer as far as what you prefer. And we'll go. Dom, will have you go first, and then Carrie next, and we'll just kind of stay in that consistent order the whole time. So, Dom, first one is favorite offense or favorite style of offense.
Run and gun, 4 out, 1 in. If you have that good big, so that's pretty much it for me.
Okay, and Casey.
Yeah, I'm definitely a 4 out, 1 in guy as well.
I think a lot of people like that one. All right, what about Dom? Favorite defense?
Defense, that depends on me personally.
Yeah, you personally.
I'll say man to man.
Okay, you're a man guy. And
Yeah.
Carrie?
Yeah, man to man, black in the on balls, and then denying the passing lanes more than anything.
Okay.
When you say
All right.
black on the on balls, is that a hard hedge or what
No, that's
exactly?
like icing it. Like I like to
Oh,
keep
ice, yeah.
people up against the sideline.
Okay.
Got you. Yeah, that's super common nowadays.
Yeah.
All right, and then so sticking on defense, Dom, force baseline or force middle?
I've done it both ways, and actually in Italy, one of my favorite coaches, man, Coach Kaya, we always forced the guy to the middle, because we always had that help from the nail. So I don't know. It used to irritate teams so much that I loved it.
Uh-huh.
I loved it. I feel like with the baseline, it makes you rotate a little bit more, but with the middle, you get a chance to just, stun at it, make your man hesitate, and you get back. So either way works for me.
Okay, so you're 50-50 on that.
Yeah.
And what about you, Carrie?
Everywhere that I played, everywhere that I coached, we always forced baseline. Giving up middle is kind of the cardinal sin in our defense. So that's kind of what I've grown to respect and to keep as my ideology as well.
Bro,
Yeah.
that rubbed me the wrong way. Like my first time doing it, I'm like, man, this is stupid.
Uh-huh.
Playing in the games and those teams don't score over 60 points.
Yeah.
All right, you got something going. Like I don't know if we just bought into the system, but it worked.
I mean, the force baseline is the most common, right? But forcing middle is called pack line defense a lot of times. And from what I've seen, the colleges that do run that are normally pretty high, like in the defensive efficiency. So I think there definitely is something there with pack line, and it's something that I've been looking to learn. So it'd be that's a different podcast, but that's a good topic.
It's different, man. It's really different.
Yeah, I think it probably depends too if you have a rim protector or someone at the rim that can clog up the paint a little bit more when someone does get middle. If you don't have that personnel, it probably makes it a little harder.
Yeah.
100%.
All right, so let's see. We got one middle, one baseline. Okay, well, what about? And I guess we already kind of talked about this. But I'll say man or zone defense, but you guys both said you prefer more man, right?
Yeah, it's situational though. I mean, there's obviously times where you want to mix it up right after a timeout if they're trying to draw up a play or something and you disrupt their offense with some zone or something like that. But when it comes down to what you're going to hang your hat on, I find it hard when you're a coach who emphasizes toughness if you're relying on zone defense.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we talk about this all the time that like if you're gonna commit to playing zone the whole game, then you're just kind of at the mercy of the other team having an off shooting night or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I look at that like, let's say if you're approaching a team that just can't shoot and they're just so fast off the ball. I mean, I feel like that zone will be very helpful. So like you said, it's situational with that because we've run like zones on teams like the whole game and it just kills them.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, so last question here then, Dom, is mid-range. You like teaching the mid-range jump shot?
Yeah, I think it's a lost art. Everybody wants to shoot threes now. The mid-range, that's your money. That's one of the toughest shots to make in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what about you, Carrie?
I feel like the mid-range is a great shot if you practice it. So I know analytics are totally against the mid-range, but for example, when I was in college, we'll play Gonzaga. We would always be so bottled up because they knew that our program didn't want mid-range shots. We wanted the three or key type of offense. And so if they're giving you the middle of the floor, that 15-foot area, and you can't take it, you have nothing. You know, they had a rim protector in Karnowski who was 7'1" or 7'2", and then their guards just pressure the ball. So you don't really have a lot. You're shooting threes over a hand or you're shooting contested layups. It's tough to score. So if you practice that shot and you can get by your defender and rise up, I think that's a great shot. And sometimes you have to take it in order to be successful.
And Og and I have had this talk before about that, and I think that was one of the main things we talked about was like if you practice it and you can use it to keep the defense honest, then it's something you got to use. You know, obviously you don't want contested mid-ranges all the time, but at the same time, you don't want contested threes all the time either, right? So I think if you want to try and teach that because, you know, it makes you that 3-level scorer and just keeps the defense a little more honest. So, all right. Well, appreciate that, the little rapid fire section there. Let's kind of dive into the main focus of the episode today now. So, you know, lately there's been a little bit more of athletes speaking out about their coaches and, you know, how their coaches have been talking or acting, you know, especially with issues coming to race. So do you guys feel like that's a common problem in, let's say, you know, right now college basketball? Or do you think that's something where it's being made a bigger deal than it is? And I guess we'll start with Carrie, you can start this one.
I think for the longest time, this wasn't made a big enough deal. And so now you have a lot of bottled up emotions. You have programs where in basketball, Black people are not the minority. You know what I mean? In college basketball, Black people are quite literally the majority. Mm-hmm. And so, but when you look at coaching staffs, we're underrepresented in that regard. Like Pac-12 has 0 Black head coaches. So you don't have to be Black to want to understand what people are going through and how they feel. But I think it's irresponsible to not touch base on it because you have people who, you know, feel a certain way. And we're talking like the game has moved so much towards psychology, right? Like mental health is now spoken about with normalcy. It's a part of the game now. And so this has affected a lot of people's mental health. There are times where you have to step back and disconnect from everything going on because it's just too heavy. And so if you're not touching base with your players and seeing how they feel, it's irresponsible in the sense that it just seems like you don't care about them. And so I think it has to be discussed. It has to be unpacked because that's what basketball is for a lot of people. It's a safe haven where we can go and have these conversations and we can use this domain to really change the world. Like the NBA changed the world, if people want to admit that or not. As soon as the NBA shut down, the whole world shut down. You know, so we have to be able to use this platform. And you got people looking at like how Kyrie's going about it. And you may have your opinion, but he's creating dialogue. And so I think the best thing about basketball is you don't see a lot of, you know, white people or people who don't understand Black people in this regime because there's understanding here. You don't have to always agree, but basketball is a place where people can come to an understanding. And so I feel like as leaders, as coaches, as mentors, we have to do that in order to keep the narrative going forward, in order to be doing our job the right way.
Don, what do you think?
Man, what he said was like the bottled up emotions, you know what I'm saying? Now it's starting to overflow. We've been going through this forever. And with the basketball part, it's like a safe haven for me. So when it all took place, I got in contact with my old head coach from APU. I was talking to him. You know, he's a white male, and he was like, "Man, I wanted to know how was he engaging with his kids because majority of the team is Black." Mm-hmm. So the main thing is with us, you know what I'm saying, with the athletes, we go to these schools, we're basically under the care of our coaches, you know, and majority of the coaches are white.
Yeah.
So if they're not checking on those kids to make sure that they're okay or make sure that they understand what's going on, how to move and make sure that they understand that the coach has their back, then they don't really know what to do. So it's more so now, like us as athletes, we need to use the platform that we have to make sure that people really understand, because sports, in my opinion, it kind of rules the world in a sense, because they look at these athletes, like you look at LeBron, whatever he says, people hang on to it. They pay attention to it. They follow it. And it's just a tough situation, man. It's every time I think about it, like you get like anxious, my heart and stuff is beating fast. It's stressful because I've experienced it so many times in different forms, different countries. You know, it started when I was 15 years old. So with the basketball part, I mean, I think we do need to keep our foot, keep applying pressure and making sure that we get our point across.
Do you, Og, did you want to go ahead and say something?
I just wanted to ask a question, but I'll let you go first.
I was just going to ask, do you think that, you know, do you think the majority of coaches out there are very inclusive and understand, you know, where people of different races are coming from, and especially where the Black community is coming from? Or do you feel like a lot of coaches are more looking at it like they're athletes, they play for me, and that's, you know, about as far as that goes, and outside of that, they don't really pay attention to the rest of the stuff?
Go ahead, Damo.
That's a loaded question, and just by looking at what's been like consistently happening, you try to look at the universities and try to see who posts what, to see if they're actually behind us, if they're going to support us, because without us, that program does not exist. Period. Like if we all, that's a fact. And just, I think like they don't want to, it makes them uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? When people are comfortable, you're good. When you're uncomfortable, that's when you start sweating. You know what I'm saying? You get nervous and everything like that. So that's why I was glad that I had that conversation with my coach, because he was pissed. And he was like, man, the only thing that I want to do is basically listen to what my kids are saying so I can understand it, because I will never experience what you guys are experiencing. Mm-hmm. So just the fact that he took that step of just trying to listen and comprehend what's going on, because it's, a lot of people listen, but they don't hear what is being, you know what I'm saying, what is being said. So that's the tough part. Like you can see it, but do you actually understand it? But they're never in that position. So you just have to, you kind of have to reverse it and see how you would react if that was your family in that type of situation. And how would you approach it?
For me, it's very interesting because, you know, the higher you go, the more sports, and with basketball being a power sport, you can say basketball specifically, the more they become the most visible part of these institutions, right? Like I didn't know anything about St. Mary's before I saw them in the NCAA tournament. I knew they had Matthew Dellavedova. I knew they had Patty Mills. I didn't know they only had 3,500 undergrads until I got to campus on my visit, or until I started looking it up. You know, I didn't know what the diversity or the demographics looks like on campus until I got there, because the only thing that you see is what's on TV, or, you know, what's being promoted. And so you look at it and you would think like, man, this a lot of diversity on campus with some of these schools. And then you get there and there's not. And you have certain organizations, you know, Black student unions and things like that, who sometimes go unheard. So I think a lot of these coaches have to understand what their position of power really means. And you have to be able to use your influence appropriately and in a timely manner. Like Dom mentioned, we're looking for a lot of what these schools post. Like Juneteenth, that's kind of becoming normal to talk about now, but most people didn't know. And so it's our job to not shame people for what they didn't know. You know, if you know now and you're trying to talk about it, and you're trying to celebrate it, welcome. You know, let's all be a part of this and let's educate each other. But at the same time, it is these coaches' job to make sure that we have a collective understanding, because it's tough to lead people if you don't really know them. You know, there's the old adage, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. This is a time where you have to show people that you care. If you really want them, you know, to be bought in on your program and to be bought in on your institution, what you say really matters right now. What you don't say hurts. So I think having the conversation is the baseline. You know, actually, like I see a couple coaches who are out here at these protests, you know, just to name drop and give a put up. I'm looking at Danny Sprinkle, you know, head coach of Montana State. Like, yo, I would send my kid to his school to play for him. White dude who gets it. I'm watching his activity. I'm watching what he's saying. I've already known Danny. But looking at what he's done as a coach and as a leader, he's gained a tremendous amount of respect for me on top of that, just from how he's handled the situation, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. No, that does make sense.
I think one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that, and I don't know this, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing that you guys have dealt with racism in the basketball world before, whether it was a fan with a racial slur or I don't know, just a comment by maybe one of your teammates, a joke, something like that. Can you guys maybe share, you don't have to say any names or anything, but maybe share a time, a story of when you had to actually deal with some racism, whether, you know, it could be, like I said, from a fan, or it could even be directly from a coach, which, you know, maybe you haven't dealt with that because you've been under some good coaches, but is there a time that you guys can give us an example of a time you've dealt with that?
First.
Go ahead, Dom.
No, I'm saying, Kerry, you want to go first?
For me personally, being home, there wasn't a tremendous amount of racism in basketball, particularly. Most of the stuff that I dealt with was off the court. But when I got overseas and I became a pro, I realized these people didn't have to hide it anymore. You know, I've like when I decided to leave a team and go to another place, and these people no longer have to hold any punches, some of the vulgarities that you get, it's crazy. Like the audacity of people to speak on things like it's just so much hate. And so they'll curb it when you're playing for their team. You know what I mean? You're great when you're playing for us and when you're making our program and our city look good. But then as soon as you do something that doesn't align with what they want, the truth comes out. And so I'm not going to repeat anything, but it's alive. You know what I mean? It's alive. This is something that needed to be addressed in a lot of different ways. And my experience on top of that will be different from Dom's just because the complexion. There are still people like you had the coach in Lithuania a while ago. This was only a couple years ago, who thought light-skinned players were smarter than dark-skinned players just because of the color of our skin. So there's, you know, it's deeper than just the racism. There's colorism and all these things, but collectively under the umbrella, some of the things that you see, like basketball is a microcosm. I always say this, it's a reflection of the world. And so if that's existing in our domain of sport, you know it exists beyond that.
I've been, I was in Poland with some of my Polish teammates and the Americans. It was one of the guys' birthday. And me, just coming from Detroit and being, you know, how my father raised me, is always paying attention to your surroundings, just checking the scenery out before you even engage into anything. So as we get to the, it's like a hookah lounge or something like that. And there's a group of Polish people. It was like a separated group. They're called Polacks. And Polacks are basically like the gangsters or whatever, you know, in Poland. So I see a couple and we're trying to get in. Now the spot is one way in and one way out. So my guy says, yo, like, let's go in there. I'm like, dude, hold on. Like, this does not look right. So as I'm telling him this, a guy walks up to me, and they speak English. They speak it when they want to. You know, they know English. So the guy walks up to me and, you know, just like, yo, like, are you from Africa? Like, just straight up. And it caught me off guard. I'm like, dude, like, no, I'm from Detroit, you know? And he was like, you know, I see your skin, you know, it's like Africa. Like, get away from me, you know? So when that happened, it just went up like, okay, if we go into this place and, you know, drink or whatever, you know, you're drunk. So you're kind of, you know, you're a little slow. So I'm like, dude, like, let's just leave. let's leave. He's like, no, why? I said, bro, look, let's leave. Because if we go downstairs, there's like 6 of them right now, but that number can multiply. I'm like, that'd be a bad situation for us. So I ended up getting them out of there or whatever, but that was like the first week when I was out there, the first week. And, you know, different countries and stuff varies or whatever from the fans and whatnot. But like he said, when you're there, when you're playing for them, they love you. As soon as you make a decision that's best for you or your family, then you'll get the real gist of the things. But some fans over there, man, are really genuine. It's just certain people, man. It's just not right. So that's just how it is, and that's everywhere.
Do you have anything else you wanted to add on that?
No, I just thought those are some good perspectives right there, because I think a lot of the kids and stuff, at least in this area where it's, you know, predominantly white, not a lot of minorities, like they don't know that people are dealing with racism even in sport, you know, like going to games or dealing with fans. And I mean, I'm pretty sure that I've heard a racial slur, you know, from someone in the crowd towards one of my teammates at some point in college, you know, and you know, you don't think too much about it at the time, but now that all this is happening and it's bringing more light to it, I can look back on that and be like, man, that was so wrong. And like, I see there is that underlying racism that does like lie in basketball and in all sports, that hopefully, you know, this is helping bring light to and, you know, destroying that. So.
Do you guys feel that overall, like basketball is a pretty inclusive environment to most people? You know, and we can talk about all different levels, whether it's overseas or at home. I guess let's kind of more focus on here in the U.S. Do you think that basketball is a pretty inclusive environment for all different types of people?
Yeah, I feel like basketball is the gold standard at the moment, because you can get so much done. Like basketball is task oriented, and you need each other to be successful, right? Like there's a reason you need 5 people on the court at one time. You know, you can't hold your values above anybody else's or your ideologies above anybody else's on your team and expect to get anything done. If you want individual, you know, go play golf or go play tennis or something. But this, you have to be able to work with people with different backgrounds and different understandings than you have. And so I think the world needs to look at, like, and I bring it back to the NBA, there's a reason Adam Silver is one of the most powerful leaders we have right now. It's, you look at like how the NFL situation was handled. In the NFL, again, Black people are not the minority in the NFL. They're the majority there, but they're underrepresented in leadership positions. So if you look at just basketball specifically, there are countries where basketball is the biggest sport, you know, the Philippines, China, Lithuania, stuff like that, where a lot of what they believe in was eradicated because they have idols like Kobe Bryant. They have idols like Michael Jordan, who they transcended race because they were such great players. And so people no longer saw them as like, oh, wow, that black guy is really good. It's just that guy's a really good basketball player, and I want to be like him. And so it kind of, you know, for a lot of people, it humanized Black people. It's like, wow, if he can do that, they must be just like us, or they must be pretty special. They have the same capabilities, because some people just didn't have that belief before.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's
Dom, what do you think, Dom?
I've learned about so many different cultures just from being able to play basketball. You know, the languages, just everything, man. Like basketball has been nothing but a blessing to me in my life. And I probably wouldn't have met Kerry if I wasn't playing basketball. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you meet lifelong friends through this sport, and it just shows, and it's so global. You know, it's so global. And the people, like I talk to more people in Europe than I do in the States. You know, so it's just with those relationships and everything that I've built with them, man, like it's all because of basketball. So I definitely wouldn't be the person I am if it wasn't for the game. And like Kerry said about the NBA having the biggest platform, with Adam Silver being one of the most powerful guys over, you know, in the world, And it just shows, man. It shows how he sticks up for his players, how he makes sure everybody's included. And it's like a complete difference with the NFL. And hopefully they can figure that stuff out so those players can have a little bit more power with what's going on. But yeah, man, basketball is almost everything to me.
Do you think when we're talking about, I guess we already talked about teammates and coaches, but how do we improve on, you guys both said you feel like basketball is a pretty inclusive place. How do we improve on that? Like, is there still a lot of room to improve? Is it kind of a minor adjustment? Like, what do you guys think? What's kind of the next steps? Like, what do we do to go from here?
I think like it's just adapting, man. Everything is going to continue to evolve. That's just life. But the first thing is probably, man, just understanding what the basketball can bring, like the friendships, the relationships, and everything like that. Because you have different races, everybody's coming together. So if you really take the time to know each other, rather than just going on the court, after that you're going about your business, like to actually get a chance to know that person. Like, for example, like with Kerry, he's giving me books to read, and I've ordered those books, I'm reading them and everything like that. So it's just like, if we don't really talk about anything other than basketball, then I won't really know these things. Like I learn new things when I interact with them. So I'm very thankful for that. And like I said, if we just continue to evolve, because we can't stay stagnant, just like now, like everybody's starting to speak up about this, and you have more of the Generation X, like the white kids, like they're really speaking up about this, but it's through basketball because of the people who they interacted with, So all that stuff is helpful, man, but we just have to continue to evolve. That's it. We just can't stay stagnant. It's going to continue.
Yeah, I think the formula for growth is consistent. The first thing is self-assessment. Where are we at with this? And I think we have to have a realistic assessment. We have to have feedback. I think, to be quite honest, it's going to be different for coaches of color versus coaches who are not of color. I think coaches who are not of color, your job is to invite these moments that create dialogue and actively listen. Like, I think if you just show your players that you want to learn as much as you're trying to teach, there's a lot of power in that. But I think, like Dom said, the major thing is committing to learning, and whatever that takes. Like, everybody expects progress to be linear, and it's not. That's not how it works. Sometimes you get worse as you're trying to get better. But we have to understand and be able to recognize the wins that we've collected along the way. This is not what it was 40 years ago. If you see a black man on the street getting harassed by police, you'll see white people stop and pull their phone out and want to record it and want to help out. So we have to be able to recognize exactly where we're at, because this is not something that you can quantify, right? Like, we've gotten better. In basketball, you can quantify growth. I got better. How much? Well, I shot 5% better this year than I did last year from three. Or, I turned it over 2 times less per game than I did last year. So we're so used to analytics and quantification and things like that. This is a more qualitative approach. So we have to, one, create the dialogue and help these kids understand the proper vocabulary of what's going on, how to articulate what they feel, because a lot of them don't know how. They feel frustration and they don't know how to explain to somebody what I'm feeling. So as coaches, we got to teach them to speak, and we have to be willing to listen. And I think we just got to meet the moment. We have some powerful leaders that we have to be able to, piggyback off and follow their lead. We got to know when to follow. We got to know when to push the needle.
I think a couple things that came to mind when I was, looking at the representation. And I think, Kerry, you might have mentioned it earlier. NBA right now is about, I think it was like 74% black. But the amount of head coaches that are black is like 20%. And I looked up the other day, and I think there are only 2 black GMs. So the higher you go, when you start looking at ownership, when you start looking at general managers, presidents, there's very little representation. of black coaches and, GMs in that realm. So I think that's definitely something. And again, like you said, maybe it's something that it takes time, but I think that should improve. I don't think you can sit here and say 3/4 of the league are black, yet we only have, 1% that are in positions of power. I think the same thing with when you look at like college coaches and players, same thing, about 55% players are black at the college level, but only about 20% are coaches. And at this point, that's a very disproportionate number to how many there's definitely been plenty of guys that have played that have probably wanted to get into coaching and they haven't been given those opportunities yet. So that was something that really stood out to me when I saw it. And then one other thing that, it's a little bit off tangent, but if we're going to talk about inclusiveness, I think we got to cover this too, is I think basketball can improve on its view on women's basketball and just different genders and that type of stuff. Because I don't think there's a lot of love for that. I think with guys that played at a high level, there's respect for the most part. But I think when you look at like the average fan or just the average person that's not as involved like that, you see a lot of hate. If you see a women's player post something, you're going to go down in the comments and see some really, nasty, mean things written about them. So I just wanted to make sure I touched on that because I don't want to pretend like that's not an issue as well. But those are a couple thoughts for me. I don't know if Og, you had anything else you wanted to add, but
No, that was good.
You guys got anything else on that part?
No, I think people who are really comfortable in their journey as a hooper and what they've done, or as a coach or leader, they understand the value in women's basketball. Like me training the youth, if she can play, come work out. I trained a girl 2 days ago. She's going to San Diego State. She's going to kill it there. She's got more game than a lot of these young boys that these dudes are training. And I really got to be on my game when I train her. I got to have a reason for why I'm putting these drills in. And this has to be a method for her development because she's so advanced. This is, again, we have to be able to recognize the wins, just like for women's basketball. We do have more support than we had before, but we still have a long way to go. So you do have all those nasty comments, and it's a very similar struggle. For me, what's been crazy is to, as a person of color, you see this struggle, you have to be able to identify with other people's struggle and how they're dealing with something similar. Like a lot of people still struggle being around LGBTQ, and it's like, man, that's the same form of oppression. You know what I mean? Or like it's the same. Oppression is oppression. We got to be able to help each other through it. Like you guys, I'm sure being basketball players yourself, sometimes people are like, oh man, you ain't got no game. You the white dude. White men can't jump, all that. That's oppression. Like we got to get off all that and just like move each other.
Those are good points. All right. So talk about how to make it more inclusive. So now let's talk a little bit more about like just being an athlete in general. I think nowadays compared to maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago, there's more of an expectation to speak out against those type of injustices. Not that there weren't great athletes speaking out. I mean, you can look back, Bill Russell, Muhammad Ali, you can go down the list of guys in the past that have spoken out. But I think nowadays, especially with, social media, and there's so much more reach for players, we constantly have access to them. There's this expectation that when something is, happening, there is an oppression, there is injustice, that they need to speak out against it. Do you think that's fair? Or do you think that, we're expecting too much?
I'm in between on that one because I look at LeBron in this scenario. He gets critiqued on every little thing that he does, and he's probably one of the biggest. Well, he's the biggest athlete that really speaks out for us. That's on a consistent basis. But as an athlete, man, like we are so powerful in a sense because the sport that we play. And people hang on to our words, man. Like it changes. You can tell by, even with my example, like with family, they may not know how much money I'm bringing in or whatever, but it's like if I say something, everybody follows. Like it's sad in a way, but it is what it is. So with an athlete, man, and right now, with what's going on, I think we should be able to use our platform in a positive way to shed more light on the situation and make sure that people understand what's going on and what we're going through. But it's just the fact on if people are really just going to listen, man, because they look at the videos when we're shooting or whatever, but are they looking at the videos when we're talking about the social injustices, the racism, the oppressions, everything like that? So that's the part that I'm like, I'm weary on. I don't know if they're really going to continue to pay attention to it, like with the consistency part of it. I don't want it to die down.
Right.
Just to answer your question as directly as possible, I think it's completely fair. I think leadership is very dynamic. It's not static. And this is where leadership is going. This is what the times have done to change leadership. You're expected to speak out against injustice if you want to be in a position of leadership. And that comes in a lot of different forms. You know, if how can you call yourself a leader if you're not speaking up for the guy who's getting bullied? You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what the situation is, but if you're not, like, leadership is speaking out for what's right now. You see some of these young kids who are in high school and they're going viral on the internet because they're doing things, speaking up for the kid that's getting bullied, or, you know what I mean? These kids are pulling their money together and buying the kid shoes who was getting picked on by his high school, like, classmates. That's leadership. And so nobody, like, again, the times have changed so much where you look at back in the day, Charles Barkley was on commercials talking about, I'm not a role model. Nobody's saying that anymore. Everybody kind of understands what comes with their profession in the NBA. You want that big paycheck? Great. This is what comes with it. You know what I mean? You want to be a head coach? Great. You can't be online talking about Hennessy and drinking and stuff like that. That's not what job is. So you want to be, you know what I mean, a leader of your community. This is what you got to do. A lot of these people will speak to guys like Kobe Bryant and how much he influenced them growing up. So you're basically saying without that kind of leadership, you wouldn't be here. So do your part and give back and do the same thing.
That's a good point right there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's get into kind of like the last part here. So talking about speaking out against things right now with the NBA restart or the potential restart in Orlando, there's obviously been somewhat of a divide where you got players like Kyrie, Dwight Howard, Lou Williams, talking about how, you know, if they restart the NBA season, it could take away from the current movement. You know, and then you got people on the other side saying, no, we want to play. This is, you know, for some of us, this is our paycheck. What are you guys' thoughts on that? And I'll throw it to you first, Kerry. Like, do you see both sides on that? Do you feel like, you know, Kyrie and them have a great point? Do you think that they should just play, or what do you feel?
I think so much of the online opinions come from lack of knowledge. People form opinions before they have any facts. Like, you got people looking at Kyrie like, why is he speaking out? Who is he to talk? Well, he's the vice president of the NBPA. So, I mean, he's got some right to speak for the players. But I really applaud guys like Kyrie Irving, Jaylen Brown, guys who are in every sense more than an athlete. You know, these guys are very articulate. They're very intelligent. And so they completely understand that they're great basketball players, but they're people first and they're black men first. So with them, like Kyrie Irving, he wasn't saying we shouldn't play. He's trying to do the right thing for his people because one day he's going to have to tell his kids, what did you do when all this was going on? And for him to say nothing, I just closed my mouth and dribbled the basketball, he's got to live with that. And so either you're going to pick the lesser of two evils. Either, you know, you're at peace with yourself and at war with the world, or you're at war with the world and at peace with, you know, or you're at war with yourself and at peace with the world. So for me, it makes complete sense. Like, I understand what he's trying to do, but I also understand that basketball, and especially like televised basketball, I think everybody needs to understand where we're at. It is a want, not a need. You know what I mean? Like, as much as we all are basketball professionals and we need NBA back, it's a want. Like, life will go on with or without the NBA. He's trying to make sure that the needs of people are met before the wants of other people are met. And I think there's a lot to say about that.
You're completely right, man. Like, I completely like respect what Kyrie Irving is doing, and Jaylen Brown and Malcolm Brogdon. Those three have been like consistently like in the heart of the battle. And now, when you say that basketball is a want, everybody wants it. As soon as that basketball game hits the TV screen, everybody's going to be tuned into it, whether there's fans they're watching, you know, live or what. But I think that they can also use that platform to stress what's going on so that everybody continues to see it. Like, because the season is going to go on for like another 3 months if they start it, right? So that also gives you more time to make sure that people get their point, that we get our point across. But I think, like, I don't want it to lose its, you know what I'm saying, its fire with them playing basketball. So that's why I'm iffy on that part, man. Like, I don't know how they're going to react to it. I don't know how they're going to keep it consistent. Matt Barnes said something about, you know, the NBPA trying to get together and making like a list of demands of what they need with the police reform, with, you know, just having the conversations and groups or whatever with them trying to figure out what's going on, man, how to come to a solution, because he said he did the Donald Sterling situation wrong. He approached it wrong. He just wanted to play basketball. That right there could have been the first step in trying to get this stuff together. So it goes both ways. If they don't play, I know that they'll make sure that they keep it consistent and try to come up with a solution. But the basketball part, like, people are going to tune into it. People are going to tune into it. So I feel that they can use their platform right there as well, too, because everybody's going to be glued to the TV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think I just was going to say that I think one thing that people don't think about is that Kyrie doing that's not the easy way out, right? He's taking the hard way out.
Yeah,
that's, you know, creating more controversy and stuff. But in his heart, obviously, he feels it's the right move. So I think, you know, you can't criticize him for that at all. So just interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, Kerry, it's a want, not a need. And I think that's kind of one of the main takeaways is, you know, as much as everybody loves playing the sport or whatever, at the end of the day, like, it's not life and death, and certain things are. And, you know, we got to keep that in perspective no matter what we're doing. So I think that was a really good point. You guys got any last thoughts before we get out of here?
A lot of people don't really understand what Kyrie Irving is talking about. So right now, like, they're like illiterate to it. So they're just mad, you know, so they form an opinion. They're emotional. The worst thing to do is to make a decision when you're emotional. And if they just take time and really, like, listen to what he's saying and understand it, then things will be a little different.
Casey, you got any?
Nah, man, I just applaud you guys for using your platform to create dialogue and really to sit and learn on this issue. I mean, obviously your podcast, you guys have done a great job of asking questions that open people up and, you know, knowing when to put input and when to kind of listen and sit one out. So I think a lot of people can learn from that, just, you know, creating these conversations and having the tough ones, you know, effective communication. My mentor told me effective communication is not about agreement. It's about understanding. And so we won't agree on everything. We won't always see eye to eye, but being able to have these type of conversations where we can get to understand each other, I think that's where change will happen.
Og?
I was going to say that was just a great point. It's just all about open up the dialogue, get more people talking, having these discussions that honestly we don't have enough. So just appreciate you guys coming on here and giving some perspectives that we aren't able to have ourselves. And so I think it was a good episode.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think Og hit it on the head. Just, it's, you know, it's sometimes it's tough for some people to have these conversations, but they're necessary. So, you know, again, I really appreciate your time. Hope you guys both have the best of luck in the future, you know, whether it's coaching, playing, whatever it is. Hopefully you guys can get back out there soon and, you know, get back to it. But yeah, thanks again. That's all we got for this week. For those of you guys watching at home, if you like this episode today, please make sure you like and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on iTunes, you can like and subscribe there as well. We come out with a new episode once a week. We hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace.